Today I'm going to be showing you how to go from this all the way to something like this. As you can see, the cheap 3D printed terrain has come a very long way and is completely unrecognizable from where we began. So come with me on this journey and I will show you how we went from the before photo to what you see on screen now. Thank you so much for joining us today, and if you like this video, go ahead and share it or hit the like button. It means a lot to me. Roll the intro. Hey guys, welcome back, and I just wanted to go ahead and knock out all of the brown tones before we got started in today's video. I hope that was okay. I just used two different shades of brown wash, and honestly it ended up being about the same color across the board, so it didn't really matter much. Now, I am trying something new in this video that I tried in the last one, where I'm using a headset attached to my phone to record my initial voice, and then in certain cases where I feel I didn't explain things well enough, I'm going back in and doing voiceovers like what I'm doing now. I just wanted to clarify that up front, so if my voice is changing throughout the video, you kind of understand why. If this ends up being a bit too distracting, then going on from this point forward, I suppose my plan is to just do, voiceovers like all the other YouTubers on the miniature side of YouTube do. But I feel like sometimes when I record something through the first time, I do a much better job of explaining it than what I can if I try to voiceover. And one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to use a concrete gray, a blue gray, and a dark gray to kind of go in and pick out bricks and make some of the bricks higher up a brighter color and some of the bricks lower down a brighter color, or a darker color. And one of the problems with this is that as I was airbrushing, I realized that because of the texture in the 3D print itself, it almost looked as though the whole thing had been made out of slate instead of being made out of bricks like it was supposed to. And I realized very early on that trying to pick out individual bricks and bring that brick tone back just wasn't going to work. So as you can see from the video I put at the beginning, I kind of quickly abandoned that and just kind of went for a fade between a brighter concrete gray at the top and a darker stone gray at the bottom, and then hit it with a dirt wash, which was the Agrax Earth shade, and then I kind of dry brushed the original concrete gray and some whites back on top of it. For today's video, I was using my Badger 100, and I actually had some issues with it today, something I had never had happen before. I think one of my gaskets inside the airbrush is getting ready to die, and you'll see me feathering it quite a lot in the high speed of the airbrush section of this video, but I'm gonna definitely have to take it all the way apart and kind of figure out what was going wrong with that. I have some friends of mine who are more expertised than I am about airbrushing, and I'm definitely gonna have to consult them to make sure I can get this problem fixed. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna be quiet now. We're gonna do our little high speed, and then I'll get back to you guys when I have something important to tell you. Okay, so we're gonna be using an old piece of cardstock as a palette because we're gonna be doing some dry brushing, and we're gonna be using mostly these three colors. I'm just using cheap craft paints because it's readily available, and with as much of the sealant that I'm gonna be putting on this terrain to help protect it, I don't have to worry about this stuff coming back off again. If I was worried about it, like with painting normal traditional models, I'd be using higher quality acrylic paints, such as the Citadel paints that you see on the table, or even the Vallejo, or heck, even going so far as to say the Reaper paints, because even I believe the Reaper paints are better than the Apple Barrel stuff. But we're gonna start out with like a desert tan color, and we're gonna go super light on this. And this is just gonna add a little bit of color back into the piece. And anywhere there is stonework, there is going to be a mild dry brushing, including in the dirt texture itself. And we just want to get, again, the majority of it off. I'm going to start by dry brushing the dirt texture first to kind of get the majority of the paint off of this brush. So we're going to just start with that, lightly dab it into and around the brick. And again, we're just trying to add color to the piece. We're not trying to create streaks. We're not trying to create a hard edge. Like you can see in here, we've added just a little bit of color. That's what we're wanting. We're trying to add color. We're not trying to add stark streaks or scrape marks or scratches. We just want to add color. If you add a little bit too much, you can get in there real early on with a finger and kind of wipe it back down. Part of what this is going to do is it's going to help it to blend in on no matter what table you add it on, unless you're doing something like a Martian terrain type thing. But then once this is done, we can go ahead and we can be a bit more dramatic with grays and whites. In this case, I'll be mixing a concrete gray, very similar to the Dawnstone that we used at the beginning, with a straight white. And then when we're all done with this, we are gonna go ahead and we're gonna hit the whole thing with a brown wash. Agrax Earth Shade is what I'll be using. It's a nice dark brown wash. I've got an older bottle that's getting ready to go bad anyway, so it's a good way to use it up. The stuff does expire, so it's good to use up for these terrain projects before it goes bad. I will be repeating these processes on the other one, and I will cut back when the wash is on it so you can see it all dried up before we move to the next dry brushing stage.
And we're back with the scary stage, or arguably scary stage, at its completion. The wash has been applied, as you can see, because as I stated, it's a wash that was going bad. There's places that have dried a little starker than others. It's fine. With the dry brushing stage that we're now going to commence, there shouldn't be any issues going forward. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a nice bright concrete gray, and then we're going to mix a tiny bit of the khaki color with a white, and that'll be our final edge highlight now that everything is at this stage. So you're going to want to find yourself a nice big brush. Doesn't necessarily have to be a new brush, but something that is got a nice soft bristle to it, and you're just going to go ahead and mush the paint down into those bristles. And then, unlike before, you can either use a piece of cardboard, which will soak up a lot of moisture, or you can use a fresh paper towel. But we do want to be very stark with this dry brushing stage. So this is going to be a lot of layers, and it's going to be nice and slow build up. And then mostly that is due to the fact that, as you can see, this cheap 3D printing doesn't really give us great detail, and we're basically dry brushing the striations that you would normally want to ignore and fill with 3D printing, which is completely unavoidable when working with as cheap a 3D print as what we're working with. So you can see I'm just going over the same area over and over again until I build up to the brightness that I want. If you're having a hard time telling if it's something you like or not, if you have your game table set up, go ahead and put this on your game table, put a miniature next to it, see what it all looks like when it's all put together, said and done, and decide for yourself that way. If you're having a hard time visualizing the piece when it's finished, that is an excellent way to try and help keep yourself on track.
So a mistake that I made when working on this original piece is I told you guys to do khaki edge highlights. So I wanted to take a break away and show you guys that I ended up using a bone to a almost pure white for doing all of the edge highlighting on all of these raised surfaces, just to separate the edges from the brick slats that are created through 3D printing. So I just wanted to show you guys that that is what really should have happened. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. So again, like you can see, I'm using more of a khaki color than an actual bone or near white color. And that's a mistake that I made, but I wanted to take that breakaway to show you guys. And something that I wanted to cover also is that anytime you have a stark edge, like the actual edge of the piece there on the left hand side, you want to dry brush from both sides, because if you don't, you'll end up with a fade on one side and a hard sharp line on the other.
And that's pretty much where we're at. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other one, and we'll cut back when we're ready to start doing all of these little extra detail bits and adding color to anything else that we want to add before we start adding all our foam flocking.
So 3 of my favorite products that Games Workshop makes: Creeping Vines, Barbed Bracken, and the Citadel Skulls. Now, something to keep in mind with these products is 2 of them, the Bracken and the Creeping Vines, come on this style sprue, which is almost like a galvanized rubbery plastic that is super flexible. And I really love using and working with this because, as you could see in the build, you can just wrap it around stuff and just glue it down. And it works really, really well for stuff like that. And as well with the leaf and foliage, if you need to heat this up and bend it so that it fits into a corner to hide a mistake or whatever the case is, it works really, really well. However, the Citadel Skulls are on traditional sprues, and that's not a problem. They need to be because of how delicate and how small they are. But they are some of my all-time favorite scatter terrain type stuff. I've got a few of them all painted up and decorated up and ready to go. I know you can't see it from this far away, but they're ready to go to be locked into place. I wanted to just take a second to talk about the product because I think it's a great product, and if you're doing lots of models and you're doing lots of terrain,
I think all three of them together are less than $30 depending on where you get it from. So it's an arsenal tool that really should be in your arsenal. This is something that I feel everybody should get. And if you shop around, you might be able to find a place where you can get a coupon and actually get a pretty decent deal on all of them. So we're going to be working with a few different products today to kind of do the flocking. We've done a base stage by going ahead and pre-painting up the green vines that you can see on screen. However, we're going to be using a mix of various products, everything from like sand and baking soda, which the baking soda was taken care of when we did the preliminary steps. You can see that really fine grained sand on the top there. That's all done with baking soda and glue. And then the rock effect that is done on the bases is done with various types of talus for model railroads. And then we are going to be working with static grasses, flocks, various different ground effects, and we can do a more in-depth video about that if this is something that you guys really want. But I'm basically just going through and I'm starting with the largest size grass granules and largest size static grasses and working my way down through the foam flocks all the way back down to very fine grit talus for almost like a gravelly path. And that's basically what we're doing to build up the shapes and colors of the ground texture, as well as adding some foam flock along the walls to create more of a finer vine-like material. So you've got these larger vines that are more of a fantasy style setting, and then you've got some of this foam flock creating more traditional, more realistic looking vines. And between the two of them, I personally feel like it adds a lot of life to the piece. So starting out with a lightly watered down PVA base, this is just regular white school glue. We're going to lay this all out in a staggered pattern. We're not trying to create a known pattern, meaning we're not making smiley faces, we're not doing straight lines. We're staggering it, we're putting it all over the piece. And we're just going to do little splotchy bits, and then we're going to go in and we're going to actually add the first wave of flocking. I'm starting with foam flock, and we're just doing this to lay out some basic patterns before we add in the grass flock, so that way the grass flock and the foam flock kind of blend together a bit. And then I'm going to redefine that a bit later on by adding a little bit more foam flock in places later. And we're just going to continue along with this method across both pieces, just adding bits here and there, going back in again with this PVA like I said, and we're laying this all out so that we can lay in the really large static grass flock up along the base where it would be disturbed the least by animals and people. That's where the longest grass pieces are going to be, which is why I'm focusing the glue up along the base as opposed to just spreading it out all over the place. Coming in with a little bit thicker foam flock, this is going to add more of a bushy effect, a more wild and overgrown, more natural effect than what we would normally have. Now this looks great on its own. You could stop here, but I'll also be adding a little bit of my forest floor mixture in places, and this is really going to help blend the surface together between all of these colors and not have so much of this original brown color showing through. Just real quick, some of the tufts and things that I'll be using to put on some of these final touches along with the Citadel products, and a little bit of cheesy movie magic in a 3, 2, 1. If you don't have any of the fancy Citadel products like what I've been talking about using, you don't have a lot of bits in your bit box, this is what you can accomplish through just using flocks and foams and things like that. These are relatively cheap materials down at your local hobby store or even online. You can get these in bulk a lot cheaper than you can buy them in small amounts. So again, I recommend working on an entire table's worth of terrain all at once. But as you can see, even if we didn't have all these bits on here, I mean, just look at this. This looks absolutely fantastic, and honestly the Citadel stuff isn't going to add a ton to this, but it will add that extra little spice of life that the Games Workshop stuff and style kind of really needs. But just look, I mean, this stuff looks great. Anybody should be proud to have something like this on their table, and I hope you guys have had fun with this project along the way. I'm going to go ahead and make the final little modifications to just put the cherry on the cake, and we will cut back with one final still of it all done and put together. And there you have it, guys. As you can see, it doesn't change a whole lot. could honestly get away with just doing things the way that we did them, but adding the skulls and these extra little citadel pieces really adds that pop of fantasy back in. As you can see, these ferns and the skulls just add a whole new hidden level of detail that really just helps to wrap everything all together. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this video. If you guys want to help support this channel, the best way to do that is to share it with your various groups, whether it be painting groups, D&D groups, whatever the case is. It really helps the channel a lot and it helps us to grow. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please leave a like if you did, or a dislike if you didn't. It lets me know what types of content you want to see in the future. And until next time, I hope your display case is always full, and I hope your pile of shame never empties. Thanks for watching, guys.